We are back. Glad you are still with us. Remember, we welcome you to be part of this conversation. Again, our social media platform is up and running. The hashtag is Good Morning Kenya at KBC Channel 1. At Jain Wambui is how you can be able to talk to us and share with us your thoughts in regards to this conversation about private security in our country. And as mentioned earlier, we have Cosmas Mutava, Chair of the Protective Security Industry Association, with us in studio, as well as Atiang, who is the head of Secretariat still at the Usalama Reforms Forum. Thank you, gentlemen, for still being with us. And I want to come to you, Jacob, and just understand from where you sit. We're still on the conversation about human rights, and especially for the security personnel. And I want to start by looking at this issue about women in the security sector. From where you sit, what are the biggest concerns that you have at least been able to feel come very strongly from the women who are in the security sector?
Thank you very much, Jane. I think the question of human rights conditions in the private security industry is really a big challenge, because remember, we are talking about a situation where the way the security guards are contracted is not very clear, and in most cases does not comply to the labor regulations that we talked about. Yes. But some of those challenges, as you mentioned, are to the extent that we are keen about the working conditions, not just of women. I'll get to the women right away, but we are talking about the working condition of the security guards. You know, most of our security guards are deployed in very difficult circumstances. In most instances, you will find them at the gates. You will find them without proper shelter. You will find them without proper working conditions. Some of them, you know, when you go to residential areas, they would man your gates. There could be just small rooms where they operate from, but you don't have that kind of an infrastructure that supports their working conditions. So that has been a big problem. So you get to a situation where the security guards don't have a dressing room, a changing room. Some of them don't even have proper toilets to use. So those are some of the very basic human rights conditions that affect our security guards.
Now, from where you sit, just we'd like to address that issue about, you know, in terms of provision for the environment, the working environment. What are some of those basics that are supposed to be there for any personnel in the security sector, and especially looking at these residential areas that require these services?
They need to have a basic minimum, and as I was explaining, they include the question that they must have, you know, proper dressing and changing rooms. They must have a place where they are working from. They must have a workstation, whether it is at the gate or wherever it is. They must have a workstation. They must have properly regulated working hours, so that you don't work, because some of the challenges, as Cosmas would agree with me, is long working hours. Most of them work for close to 12 hours every single day, with very little or no leave days, or, you know, those kind of things. So those are some of the key challenges that we are talking about. Then we are talking about the question that you brought about the challenges of women. We know very well that not just in the private security, by the way, even in the national security sector, we have fewer women. But thanks to the reforms that is beginning to include the quota, every other time there's a recruitment, like in the National Police Service, they endeavor to increase the presence of female officers by giving some quota in terms of recruitment. But when you go to the private security sector, I think we still have a big challenge, because remember, the Constitution talks about 1/3 gender, or not more than 1/3 gender, to be part of a composition of an organization or a national government. This has not been met in the private security industry. But it is not largely because of their fault. It is also partly because of the nature of, you know, the risks related to the private security industry. But I can assure you, for example, that our female security guards go through a lot of challenges, because most of them cannot, for example, be deployed to work at night. So you must ensure that if and when they work at night, then the arrangement or the condition when they work at night must be secure. The basic services must be provided for. But I wanted to point out to the fact that even when that happens, our female security officers, most of them suffer because you don't have proper maternity leaves. But when you get pregnant and you go and deliver, some of them, by just way of going for maternity, you lose your job after 3 months. There's no security of you coming back to your job after delivery. So those are some of the very cruel conditions that our female security officers go through, in addition to the fact that some of them can also not be taken to very rigorous basic physical training because of their condition at that point in time. So one must begin then to think about, as Cosmas was saying, how do you balance the question of the female officers against the basic services that are provided for, in addition to the training requirements that is needed, because you have the basic training, but remember some of those trainings are about grill, they are a bit of physical, mental, and also taking a lot of energy and time in addition to the excess working hours that these people go through. So that is why it's really important that we begin to have a very honest conversation to look at the human rights challenges that security officers go through, but more importantly, that affect female security guards in this industry.
And let me still come to you, Cosmas, on the same breath, issues concerning women in the sector and also their rights, the basic rights of security personnel being respected by the greater population as other industries are respected and upheld.
Thank you, Jane. Talking about women in security, let's think about the ownership down to the security officer. You will note that security is men-dominated industry. Right from the ownership, you find that so many men are the ones who are having ownership of these security firms, and very few ladies in it. When it comes to employment, it is more or less the same. And you find because of that problem, it trickles down all the way to what Jacob is talking about, the human rights. There are some issues that cannot be addressed in that way, because you find like when a lady is pregnant, she has to go for maternity leave and so many other things. If you are to replace that lady with another lady, and that farm has got, let's say, about 100 guards, 90 of them being ladies, and a third are going for maternity leave, you'll be left with a vacuum. And then that one will have to be replaced with men. That is to say that we need to have a good balance. On the same, again, we have an issue of finance. Just because of the nature of business, it's a labor-intensive industry. And we need now to look at that. Finance comes to play when it comes to ownership and also the payment. Again, that one we need to look at it. The other day, I think we were having a conversation with one of the organizations in the country, that is KEPSA, where I sit in the KEPSA Security Sector Board. And we came up with a program where there is a grant to give out finance or funds for security firms. But security firms owned by ladies, women in security. Can I tell you, Jane, up to now, no company has gotten that money. We are about to return the money because of that. And that's why I'm looking at it as a whole. We need to think about how to go about it. In fact, the appeal here is, if there is a lady director in that farm, please let us give that farm.
So could this be a problem of also awareness among the population and the companies that are there?
Yes, that is part of it. Awareness. But again, the issue of ownership, I started talking about ownership going to the working. The other thing that I can also talk about is condition of working situation, where we have we are campaigning for these security farm offices and also the people taking up the security services to have a room where lactating ladies can also go and have the milk and done what, so that they can spare that for their young ones, that milk for their young ones. That is another issue where we have problems and challenges in women in security. Again, there are so many other issues. You remember, like now, the whole of this month of March, we have been talking about International Women's Day.
Yes.
When we were talking about, we were also talking about women in security. How are they supposed to be incorporated in this? We need to have more women to take up their positions. One of them in owning the farms, the other one in going for this risk business of security services. Because as Jacob has talked about, the training might also be vigorous for ladies. You know, just to make a joke, the other day I went to another country and then people were asking people to go into skiing. Then they said, if you know you are pregnant, please don't enter into this Prado, because they were going to this, gig game.
Yes.
So then somebody cracked a joke and asked, how are you talking about pregnancy? Is it 9 months pregnancy or is it 1 month pregnancy? Same way in security, we are saying when a lady is expectant, then we have a big problem, and even the duration. Sometimes openness. How long? How are you going to come out to say, yes, I want maternity leave? Is it when you are 6 months or is it when you are 9 months? And how long will you go for that?
So this calls for special sort of regulations that need to be acknowledged, not just by individual companies, but a standard that cuts across.
Yes.
To avoid discriminatory situation based on, natural phenomenon.
My opening remarks, I did say that we need to have set standards.
Yeah.
And when we are setting the standards, we also set standards for the women in security.
Yeah.
The men in security, also women in security, so that we can now move ahead with the conversation.
Formalizing the industry to accommodate everyone as is accommodated in different sectors. Now, this brings me to another aspect that I did note in the brief that was sent over. Looking at private security services that are offered in the company, a larger percent, contributing to about 60%, are large multinational public security companies. And local companies take up about 40% of the market space when it comes to security provision. Why is this the situation? Let me start with you, Jacob.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jane. I think that is part of the situation. But one of the things that one needs to put straight is the fact that, as I indicated earlier, the multinationals, the international private security companies incorporated in Kenya are actually fewer in terms of the numbers. They are about 20 to 25%, but they occupy close to 60% of the market. So it means that they are fewer in terms of numbers, but they are huge in terms of the workforce. So that is the first point. So that tells you that it means they have invested into the market, and therefore they are able to provide those services. They have proper equipment. I told you that probably they don't have the best, but they have better training programs. They offer slightly better wages and probably better working conditions. So that is why they would attract more workforce, and that's why they control a larger, actually close to 60%, as you say, of the market share. But that is a question that needs to be reversed by a national policy that begins to balance the international interest against the local interest. Because as a country, again, we are aware that the government, through policies, through legislation, has been propagating the promotion of local investment and the question of employment or job creation. So you cannot do that by leaving your market to be controlled by international or multinational companies who, yes, could have better pay, but have their own other interest other than the national interest. So that is something that we really need to look at. And to reverse that, you cannot reverse it just by sitting in the chair.
Yeah.
You need a very clear policy from the government through the Ministry of Interior and the other government, agencies to begin to support, as Cosmas was saying, how do you support the locally, registered companies to, one, be compliant, and not just compliant locally. There are international standards that they need to meet in terms of the professional standards, in terms of the training, in terms of the workforce, but also more importantly, also in terms of the services that they offer. Once we address that, then we can begin to probably reverse that. But I can assure you it will take time to reverse that, because those international private companies also have interests, and the interests get deeper into our local or national government people who, as you know, the country is. Yeah. That plays a major role, because then you begin to look at that from the political or the leadership decisions that are made in that respect.
But I like the fact that you started by mentioning, looking at this companies, they invest in their own personnel in terms of the service and also the remuneration that their employees get. And this responsibility falls on also our local security companies. They have to invest in themselves in order for the rest of the population and even other investors to also invest in them.
Yes, but even as Cosmas comes in, I think the fact of the matter, and I told you we've done a lot of research, they invest, but the environment for investment, they are more or less facilitated by their own mother countries to invest into this sector. So there's that role of government. When you talk about stimulus programs, when you talk about facilitating a sector to invest in security. So yes, they invest, but there's a lot of political goodwill that follows that investment from their mother countries or from wherever they operate from. So that is lacking in this country for that.
And again, the national and county governments can really come in, especially looking at the county levels. Now, let me come to you, Cosmas. And in as much as we are hoping to get to a point where the private security sector is thriving, as we envision it too, what are some of those developments that the private security industry has made over the years that are surely leading to that destination that we want to get to when it comes to the service and the quality of service that is provided in the private security sector?
Thank you very much, Jain. What I can say is that when we formed our association, like Protective Security Industry Association, we came up with so many laws and so many regulations regulating our association towards the optimal goal for the industry and also for the sector. Yes. What we are saying is that we have been coming up with the solutions for emerging issues. For example, the other day when the pandemic, that is COVID-19, struck our country in 2020 March, we were the first people to come up with a way of saying our people are frontline workers and we need to be recognized so, because our guards are all over and they are working around the clock to make sure that there is protection, there is deterrence, there is observation, and there is a recording throughout the clock. Yes. And with that, we were meant frontline essential workers, number 13 for that matter. And we have been working with the government, cooperating with the government to come up with things like that. It is important to note that with that cooperation, we have made a lot of progress. In the past, you have been getting cases of guards being beaten in police offices and what have you. But because of our discussions with the police officers, we have a very good working condition.
Relationship with them as well.
Not like that time before. Okay. And with that, we are now moving in the right direction. We have also been having meetings with the Ministry of Interior, Ministry of Health, if you look at the training that we were giving our people in 2020, last year, we came up with a program. Apart from training our people on security and private security alone, we also incorporated public health care. Nowadays, you see our private security guards taking temperatures and even showing our people how to put on masks, sanitize, wash your hands, keep social distance. That is to say that we are working with the government to show our people the right way to go in terms of private security.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, as we draw the conversation to a close, looking at the aspect of awareness, not just for the industry players, but the greater part of the population who this industry cannot exist without, what are those things and efforts that need to be put in place to just ensure that awareness is not a problem, both within the industry players and the rest of the population, to ensure we're just speaking the same language when it comes to respecting the profession from both sides of the divide? Let me start with you, Jacob.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jane. I think some of the key things that we must begin to look at, and not just look at, we must begin to implement, are those the guidelines that were not, approved by Parliament. Because yes, you have the regulations, but the sector still lacks those guidelines. The guidelines are the operational procedures, and so those needs to be passed by Parliament. They need to be, once passed, they need to be implemented. But before that, as Cosmas has pointed out, there needs to be a public participation, one from within the industry and then the general public, so that you have guidelines that would then help operationalize some of the key issues in the industry. But two, and more importantly, is that there needs to be a paradigm shift in terms of policy of the country, and I'm talking about the government here, to begin to support the private security industry to supplement the work of the national security agencies. Because looking at over 500,000 people employed to support the national security, then it's a huge number that needs government support.
Yes.
There's also a question of culture and attitude. Actually, I would call it a culture change from the public, because that awareness is really wanting. We need to get to that awareness. But you cannot create awareness with the public that has an attitude about the guard, as Kari with Arungu on the gate. These are people who are providing a very important service that supports and supplements our national security. And remember, when we talk about security, we are talking about peace and stability of a country. So we need a very, intended culture shift and attitude change to begin to give these people a place of respect, to begin to support what they do, and more importantly, begin to support their training. Not just the basic training, ongoing training, issues of exposure, because again, as Cosmas pointed out, the world is moving to a technological arena. So how do you push the private security industry to comply to, the technological world that we are in today, not what was traditionally looked at as an old man leaving his home at 4:30 to go and guard, watch over a gate overnight. So this is a technological world, and the private security industry offer more than we can even discuss in the show this morning. The services they offer are becoming sophisticated. Some of them are now offering cyber crime support to institutions, to banks, to companies. So this is something that we need to look at, and to also reiterate the fact that the level of unemployment in this country is ballooning, and His Excellency the President has acknowledged this, and the country is beginning to look at opportunities to address unemployment. This is one of them. And if we take it positively and also encourage our young people to look at this sector not just as a last resort, but as one of those sectors that can provide employment, but that which can also be professionalized to become an income-generating sector for this country.
A change of mindset from the greater part of the population. Now, before you get to give us your parting shot, Mr. Mutava, there's one tweet here by David Lugaho, who says, I believe we have so many small security firms that are not registered under any organization and yet they offer security. What is your take on this in terms of registration and being licensed?
Mine is to say that let them be registered, let them join any of the associations. I did mention that we are about 15 to 20 associations, starting with Protective Security Industry Association. Let them join us so that we can speak with one voice. They are there, they are offering the security, yes, which is very essential. But we need to speak with one voice.
Yes.
In that, we are giving them updates of what is happening in the country.
Okay.
Yes.
There's also Tape Lift Investigator. That's his handle on Twitter. They're asking, where are your offices found? For those who want to get in touch and maybe register.
The offices of Protective Security Industry Association are on Gong Road. That is on Tipshank building, the one that houses Equity Bank and Cooperative Bank. We are on the 5th floor.
All right.
Yes.
So if you feel you want to register with them as an association, you can be able to get in touch and see how you can, professionalize and streamline your security firm. Now, in regards to closing this conversation and your closing remarks to our viewers this morning, looking at issues to do with awareness, and again, as Jacob has highlighted, the issue of mindset that we have as a population.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jain and viewers. What I can say is that we need to have attitude change towards all these things. Attitude change towards private security industry and sector for that matter. Once we do that, we are going to even be supporting our government in the right way. You'll note that the Big Four agenda, all of them has got security element in it. And with that, we are going to support the government in the right way.
Okay.
Taxation needs to be looked at keenly, because it's in this that we are using so many gadgets and equipment in the security sector.
Yes.
If you look at the thermal guns that we are using, maybe you don't know the cost. The time we started using them, they were very costly. Now the cost has come down. I wish we can have talk about taxation. The 1% tax on turnover is going to eat the industry very much, because this is an industry which is labor intensive. And if we impose on the 1% tax, is going to affect the industry very much.
Okay.
You might even find some of them closing shop. And since we are employing a lot of people, we want to deal with unemployment in the country. We want to deal with insecurity in the country. And this is one way of doing that. Lastly, I think I want also to talk about election preparedness. Next year, we are going to national election for our leaders. And you'll find that private security offers some of these people, bodyguards and so many other people. We are heavily involved in this. We need to start the conversation around election preparedness, so that by the time we reach there, things are going to be in the right order. And then the other one is the issue of the bills in Parliament, which some of them are in Parliament, others are still not yet gone there. We need to talk about that. Non-paying customers. I did mention that 75% of the services are offered to government, parastatals, institutions, and county government. We also need to have a discussion on non-paying customers. If these governments do not pay for services rendered by the security, then you can find that we are going to have a very big problem. Yeah, thank you.
All right. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming to share with us this information. I believe the private security industry is one that is growing, and we need to also streamline and professionalize this security industry. It's part of the population and part of the economy, and at the end of the day, we all need to live in a safe environment, and that starts by embracing both the public and private sector when it comes to security. We have been speaking with Cosmas Mutava, who is the chair of the Protective Security Industry Association, as well as Jacob Atiang, who is the head of Secretariat at the Usalama Reforms Forum. Thank you, gentlemen, for being with us this morning. We wish you the absolute best.
Thank you, Jain, and thank you all.
All right.
Thank you very much, Jain, and our viewers.
Karibu sana. Now, Good Morning Kenya is not yet done. Do stay with us. We'll be right back.